do men want?
Manifests itself in relationships, and you feel it in relationships, and they can be very powerful spiritually. And if that's what you need, that's what you should go for.
And she said, oh, I'm going to go do a sweat lodge this evening. And I begged her to take me along, and that was about 6 years ago.
Welcome to Speaking of Men. You're watching public access television from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I am your host, Mike Rivas. Joining me in the studio today, once more, is Gary Rose, executive producer of the For Your Information video group, and Marc Davidson, a native New Mexican and counselor and educator here. I might mention that Marc is the recipient of the Distinguished Teacher Award given by the White House Commission on Presidential Scholars for 1991. Our topic today is male responsibility in sexuality. Let's start out with Gary. Tell us a little bit about what your basic message was in the video, why you chose sexuality, and how you settled on the primary ideas for the production of the film.
Sexuality, talking to your kids ages 2 to 16, the project was put together entirely for the purpose of helping parents know how to communicate with their children properly. Is from the extremes of using proper terms about their genitals, about private parts as we call it, learning how to communicate with the children about the issues that are around them all day long. Marc Davidson, the expert in this tape, has done a wonderful job communicating to the parents on how to talk to their children. It's the key issue behind educating your children. If you know the information, then you can approach that and tell it to your children. If you don't know the information, they get lots of misinformation. That's the basic reality.
That seems to be one of the major problems in America today, the fact that there aren't skills and information available, and somehow people are so isolated that there's no place they can readily turn to gain that. Marc, would you recap a little bit for us what the film, what sexuality, talking to your kids ages 2 to 16 is about, and some of your concepts of why the film is important?
Sure. Concept of the film, there are several concepts tied in, but I guess the primary themes involve the belief that family is still the basic center of education for young people. Facts may be presented at school in a limited sense, especially when we're talking about sexuality education. It's so controversial, but that teachers and school systems are limited as to what they can and can't say, even for factual information. And even when the kids do have that factual information, they often don't put it into use. I think it's like a lucky rabbit's foot or something, that they have this information, so nothing bad is going to happen to them. Families can take the factual information and weave it into their own family morals and ethical systems, their religious values, if those are an important part of their family values. All of the story that goes with the family. You know, who were you, Dad? What did you do when you were dating? Did you ever come up to this situation? What about Mom? And some kids won't ask them in those ways, but they're interested in the stories. They're interested in the struggles. Not a lecture or a sermon, but they're interested in the story of the people that their
Life
parents were.
experience.
That's right, exactly. Because it turns factual information into real life experiences, choices and consequences.
Do you feel, we're approaching male responsibility in sexuality? Is it true that to this point women have been the educators primarily, and I feel it's fairly certain that women are usually the ones that are looked at as the responsible party to make sure that there's not a pregnancy, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I think that's still true. I think that almost every sexuality educator or health educator that you could talk to would say that that's true, that women are still the primary carriers of the information, partially because they're just good at it, but also because it's been thrust upon them by male absence. Men, fathers, important role models in young men and young women's lives who are men, abdicating that responsibility and abdicating actually that pleasure of communicating in a responsible way. So women have to bear that full burden.
We have, of course, your film, Sexuality, Talking to Your Kids, Sexuality, Talking to Your Kids, ages 2 to 16. And would you like to set up this little clip for us?
I believe this clip is one in which there's a scene between a young man and a young woman in their late teens. And we've been following their story throughout the video about deciding whether or not it's time for them to have sex and so on, the responsibility issues and so on. And in this scene we see their final decision, having gathered information from different areas, different sources. So we'll see what their decision is.
Let's take a look at that.
You know, if we're gonna do this, Debbie, we've got to talk about birth control.
I know.
So?
Well, I got these after we talked the other night. But I didn't take any. I guess I'm kind of afraid to.
Yeah.
I really want to do this with you.
Yeah, me too. But I heard that you have to be on the pill for at least a month before it takes effect.
Yeah, my doctor told me the same thing.
I've got a condom in my wallet, but I'm sure it's expired by now. We could go to the store and pick up a new one, and then you could start on the pill tonight. What do you say? You know I love you.
I love you too. Let's do it.
I thought that was a real tender moment there in which the young man was, when he said his condom was, what was it? It had expired, in which he kind of took responsibility for the relationship and took the pressure off of her, because she was obviously worried about it and under pressure a little bit. You want to talk about that a little bit? About that's male responsibility in a way, and a man being active in the relationship.
Sure. Taking responsibility for the choices that are made as well as the consequences. One of the things that young men say over and over again in confidential settings is that nobody gives us credit for making good decisions. And I think that there's a stereotypical male that people believe in, that he doesn't care, that he's kind of a gadabout and a Don Juan figure. And certainly there are men like that. But there are many, many young men who want to know how to be responsible, who want to be a part of the decision making, because they realize there's an important part of them that belongs in that relationship. And if a child is created, that's partially their child. I hear young men saying this over and over again, and many times young men that you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear that from. So it's surprising.
We had a lady who was the founder of the Married Mistress Association, which was a women's group of married women who basically were trying to keep their sexual the sexual excitement alive in their marriage and promote monogamy. And she came out and said that she thought that in marriages most men are not interested in going out there and being sexually promiscuous, and that most extramarital affairs ultimately are based, the guy is out there not for the sex but for the warmth, intimacy, and communication ultimately. I wondered if you would say a little bit about how older men shape younger men's attitudes towards women. You know, because it's really important that I think that men begin to get a healthy understanding of who women are and the roles, what they mean to us, and what we mean to each other. Got some things you could...
Well, there's so many aspects to that conversation, but I would say that just basically that we all need to realize that little boys are constantly watching adults, as are little girls. They're watching the role models, the people that are in their life, for better or worse, noticing how they're behaving toward each other, noticing what's said and what isn't said. And oftentimes what isn't said is just as important as far as shaping ideas and concepts and goals. A lot of therapists believe, and a lot of people who study in the fields, show that that young men, right before the age of puberty, whenever puberty sets in, and then shortly into puberty, really buy into a value system of what it means to be a man. Because their hormones are going, they're understanding the sexual drive like they never have before, and they're very quickly, almost like at a salad bar of choices of what it means to be a man. And so we have TV saying this, we have movies saying that, we have all the different images from music, record covers, whatever those are. And then we have perhaps a mom or a dad, perhaps a mom and a dad, big brothers, teenager down the street, those people who were admired. And what's often missing is a mentor, is an older man who will say, yeah, these are all parts of the picture, but they don't have to be a part of your life. You don't have to be this violent, macho person. You can respect other human beings, other forms of life. You don't have to assert and conquer. And it is demonstrated in life as well as with words.
Men are set up for so much emotional numbness also. You know, we don't, you know, I mean, we're not as quick to show emotions. We deny pain. And a lot of sex is feeling.
Yeah.
I think for me, sex was the thing that opened the door on emotion. You know, up to that point, I was just, I was numb, emotionally numb for the most part. And what's crossing my mind, the message I think a lot of people get from media, especially television, film, is that sex is the goal. I mean, that's it. And sex is really secondary in the relationship. You cannot base a long-term relationship on sex alone unless you want to be miserable, I don't think.
It creates a lot of frustration in society as well, because all they see is the easy time that people in films get to the final goal, and in your opinion, is sex.
Right.
It's unbelievable how fast all of that happens in the movies, and then in reality it doesn't happen that way, and it also doesn't usually play the emotions.
And a lot of conclusions are drawn from those movies that, like, I would say that a lot of people believe that sex equals intimacy. And when a sexual encounter does not equate to intimacy in their own life, then they dump that one and move on to somebody else. It continues a pattern of using people. And I would say even movies that promote men as the aggressor and men as the conquerors of the sexual sex act even, feed to that. And even when they find, you know, the true woman who brings out their manliness and their sensitive side and so on, there's still that expectation that's bigger than life, that men are somehow these heroes. And a lot of us don't feel like heroes.
That's certainly some food for thought. We have our bulletin board queued up for you guys to take a look at. We hope, and girls, we hope you'll stay with us because we'll be right back.
Every day, all over America, thousands of abused and neglected children fall through the cracks of our court and foster care systems. They are often misplaced or forgotten, robbed of their chance for the future. You can help by becoming a court-appointed special advocate, a child's voice in court. Be a CASA volunteer. Speak up for a child.
Welcome back to Speaking of Men. We have Gary Rose in the studio today. He's executive producer of the For Your Information Video Group, and Marc Davidson, who is a New Mexico educator and counselor. And we're talking about male responsibility and sexuality. I was just to continue off the top. I noticed in the movie Pretty Woman with David Gere and the lady, they had the whole image of a young woman who was actually a prostitute leading a fairly carefree life. And it would lead you to believe that she was receiving no emotional damage, that that the things that were going on in her life were not the horrors that the reality of prostitution actually conveys. It's those kinds of messages, I think, that are real confusing. Talk a little bit for me about family value. And especially situations of divorce, maybe. I mean, we have families now that are joint. I mean, you have mom and stepdad and siblings from both, or youngsters from both marriages, and you have then you have maybe two absent fathers or moms that are trying to have input to that family. So could you expand on family values a little bit and the importance of those?
I think a lot of times families underestimate the importance of their own value system, especially to teenagers. I think most people believe that once puberty hits, that the kid checks out and that everybody is more important than the family to that person, to that young person. And that is indeed the image that the young person wants to convey, and they partially believe in that themselves. But many studies have shown that kids really do want to know what the family believes, and more to the roots of things, why this belief system is there. When they're young, very young children, they accept what we say without question. It's because mom and dad say so, or because dad says so. By the time they're teenagers, they're thinking on their own, well, I don't have to accept it because of that. And so instead of asking and questioning and saying, Mom and Dad, let's sit down and talk about this, I want to know more about it, they'll say, I don't believe that. It's a bunch of crap. And so adults take that as a challenge, but it's really a question. They're really wanting to know. They're really saying, substantiate what you say you believe. Don't lecture, don't preach, just substantiate it, justify it, so that I can buy into it too.
Walk like you talk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we talk about that a lot with the in male responsibility workshops, father-son workshops, and so on, talking about sexuality at different stages, where we have the fathers and sons together. Great workshops. And a lot of what comes out of that is that there are myths that young men buy into, partially because of media, partially because it's just tradition that's passed down. One being that young men are not in charge of their sexual actions.
They can't say no.
That's what they can't say. It's not their job to say no. And they believe, I've heard young man after young man after young man say, when I'm sexually aroused, they don't say it this way, but they say, when I'm sexually stimulated, my penis takes over, and I don't have any control. And we've bought that from somewhere. And so the myth has to be discounted in a careful way and said, you are in control. You are in control. Your penis is not in control of your life. You are in control of your sexual choices, and you are also responsible for the consequences. And when fathers and sons talk about that, or if it's not a father and son, if it's a young boy and an uncle, or whoever, a role model, a mentor, there's some valuable life lessons that are learned, not only for the youngster, but for the adult, because we have also, people at our age, have bought into those same myths for years and years.
You can really damage yourself as a male by rushing into relationships. I mean, you wound yourself when you hurt somebody else in the same way.
One of the most amazing things when we were doing this film was the image that every person we talked to when we did our market research knew everything. There was no doubt. If I asked you and said, do you basically know everything about sex? In your own mind, there was no question. Yes, I did. And we started asking serious questions about protection, minoxidil 9, how to use condoms, way certain things were done, the kind of questions kids were asking about sex, even the description of what certain kind of sex were. We were amazed how little people really knew. The tape is a great tape as far as educating parents about the facts. It's, you know, I mean, I hate to use this cliche, the facts, ma'am, only the facts, you know. It exists in this tape and it's important. And the kind of questions that the kids ask, relay that to Mark every time. You know, he's always amazed. When we were doing these segments, Mark was always amazed, I was always amazed. The kids are just, they're looking for the information, they're begging for it.
And they're getting the information. The problem is that usually it's not correct
Not always true.
And you know, when we're basing our decisions, I always tell kids that it's having sex and making sexual decisions is a bit like driving a car, and that I can leave here tonight, drive down the street and speed, and I'll get a ticket, and I'll be angry at myself because I have to pay the fine, and my insurance rate will go up, so on and so forth. But it's a live and learn mistake. On the other hand, I can take that same powerful machine that I take for granted, the automobile, and run a stop sign, and you could be walking across the street and I could kill you. And it doesn't matter how sorry I am, or if I was high or stoned. It doesn't matter if my wife just divorced me and I was beside myself. I can never give you back your life. That's a forever mistake. And just as in sexuality, we all make live and learn mistakes. But if we don't have the facts right, we could make a forever mistake that'll never leave us.
We have, of course, been looking at some segments from the film. We have another cue. Would you set that up for us?
Yeah, this is a discussion that's set up, but it is set up with a reality base that there again, when I do these seminars, parents are amazed at the kinds of anonymous questions that teenagers ask. And they're amazed at the honesty and how common these questions are. This is just a segment showing the most commonly asked questions, and I just invite you to look at them and consider the questions that we had when we were their age and just weren't able to ask them.
Well, Mark, Gary, and I invite you to take a look at this.
What exactly is meant by abstinence?
Abstinence is a term that's often misunderstood. For most people, it means that they have decided not to have sex with anyone for a particular time. It does not mean that a person has made a commitment never to have sex ever at all. Some people choose to abstain until they are married or until they find just one person with whom they want to be sexually active. The choice to abstain is not uncommon, regardless of what some of your friends may say. In fact, more teenagers simply are not willing to take the risk of becoming pregnant or of getting a sexually transmitted disease. It's just not worth the risk.
Can you get AIDS from deep kissing or French kissing?
Well, there have never been any documented cases of that happening. You may have heard that the AIDS virus has been found in the saliva and in tears of infected people. That's true, but it's in very small amounts, and it carries no real threat to people who deep kiss or French kiss. So let's review the facts about AIDS. First of all, AIDS is transmitted through blood and semen only. Blood is passed from one person to another through a hypodermic needle, oftentimes used to inject certain types of drugs when the needles are shared by more than one person. AIDS has also been spread by receiving infected blood through transfusions, but new safeguards have made that almost impossible. Now, semen is passed when a man ejaculates into another person's body, as in vaginal, anal, or oral intercourse. You won't get AIDS from shaking hands with someone, with an infected person, sitting on a toilet seat, sharing a glass or a drink, kissing or hugging an infected person, or being sneezed on or coughed on by an infected person. You only get AIDS by taking an infected person's blood or semen into your body.
Mark, I was at a party a couple weeks ago, and a couple of my buddies got really drunk, and later on, I heard they had sex together. Are they gay?
Wow. Not necessarily.
Yeah, right.
Many young people, for a number of reasons, will have one or more sexual encounters with people of the same sex. Some young people go through brief periods of times when they're actually attracted to people of the same sex. It doesn't make them homosexual if they experiment occasionally.
Can I get a sexually transmitted disease if I'm on the...
Absolutely tremendous film. Mark, how, considering the diversity in the personalities of children, how does someone go about becoming an askable parent, and give us some directions? How would someone, what's square one?
Square one is having the confidence to know that you know your child. I think that's a big doubt that a lot of people have. And being a part of that child's life in honest, open communication, beginning at an early age, but continuing through. A lot of parents do very well in the early ages, but then when their kids get a little belligerent, they're afraid that it's just too overwhelming of a task. Believing that that's not true. I think at one point in the tape we say that parents are afraid that they've blown it. And I always like to say that it's great to, in bowling, when you bowl a strike, that's wonderful, but we don't always do that. It's just as valuable to pick up a spare. So if we blow it one time, which we all do, we can pick it up. We can, not be discouraged and not be overwhelmed, but to go back and choose those askable moments and those teachable moments that only you as a parent really know. A teacher can't really know. No one else can really know but you.
There's no emotional giants out there anywhere, and there's no perfect norm. We're just human beings.
That's right.
I found in raising my daughter a lot of it. Sometimes I would just say, I've never been a dad before. This is new stuff to me. We're going to have to sit down and talk for a while. Tell me what's going on, You have a screening of sexuality, children 2 to 16. Tell us about it.
The screening is May 16th at the BDM Theater, which is northwest of the International Airport in Albuquerque, at 7 o'clock. Lots of people will be there. We invite the public to ask questions about it. They're welcome to call our phone number, 1-800-237-0071, and I'll certainly give them all the information they'd like, and they're definitely invited.
Give me a quick rundown on some of the other films you offer. We've done this before. It would be okay to do again.
We've produced 3 up to date. One of them is Emergency First Aid, which is dealing with CPR and emergencies in the home. Common Sense Defense, which is about sexual assaults, date rape, those kind of things. And then, of course, sexuality, communicating with your children. It's been fun. The tapes are great. They're educational, and that's what it's all about, is teaching parents how to deal with these situations.
Skills. Practical skills in an ever-changing world. Mike Rivas here. And this is Speaking of Men. We've been talking about male responsibility in sexuality, male mentorship. Our guests have been Gary Rose of the For Your Information Film Group, and Marc Davidson, who is a counselor and New Mexico educator. We always invite your comments, input. Check the number and call us. Mike Rivas here, telling you to stand if you can, you run if you have to, but whatever happens, don't quit.